this month, I got up into central Queensland and checked out an operation using Powertrans pit haulers with a Kenworth at the sharp end, big gear, and interesting to watch the change in mine haulage over the years. I filmed this month's classic road train in 1999, and that's last century, believe it or not. I remember editing it between trips to East Timor when I was covering Australia's intervention there. In this program, we travel through the Riverina, South Australia, Queensland's Gulf Country, and of course, the Northern Territory. So once again, I hope you enjoy these old yarns, and all the very best for the new year. This is the very heart of Australia, near the town of Alice Springs, in the McDonnell Ranges, a very beautiful place. Hi, I'm Bruce Honeywell, and welcome to Road Train 99. In this program, we'll go working and hauling cattle in outback Australia.
Well, we've got nearly 600 k's of road network on the place, and all of our weaners, cows, whichever paddocks driest or whether we've got to shift them, it's all done with a truck.
And we'll leave the outback briefly and visit Australia's premier truck show in Brisbane, and check out the latest and greatest in heavy equipment.
I have to be guilty in terms of the striping. We have a graphic artist that does some work for us, and we intended to make a statement, and I think it's achieved that.
Over the past couple of years, much of the western part of New South Wales has been opened up to the efficiencies of road train operation. So we'll travel south and take a look at hauling rice by the road train tool.
Oh, it's been absolutely magnificent for us. It's halved the movements. It's increased our productivity. It's twice as easy to coordinate, and from a logistics point of view, well, there's no comparison.
Livestock haulage presents its own problems in an ever-changing world. While in the far south of the country, we'll catch up with a sheep operation and talk to a woman whose vision is a better deal for livestock and for the people who make their living from livestock haulage.
I'd love to see specifically or especially all our livestock transport members nationally to have truck care implemented into their business. I'd like them to be the leaders in our industry.
And we'll look at a multi-million-dollar transport corporation supplying just about all the transport support to one of the world's largest copper and uranium mines.
We would expect our drivers to average between $65,000 and $70,000 a year Australian, and that by Australian standards is pretty good, because the average weekly salary in Australia is probably more likely around $30,000 a year. So it's fairly good money.
Heavy-duty Volvo prime movers seem to have finally found their stride in road train operations with the marriage of Swedish truck building and North American engines. We follow two operations spanning the nation from Adelaide to Darwin.
They love them. They love them. The only complaint I get is they're too quiet and too smooth.
And in the rugged Gulf country, fuel haulage to remote mines in the tropical savannah. So from here in the very centre of Australia, step aboard and we'll go for a drive and check out these road train operations and more.
Outback Queensland is where this story starts, a region almost totally dependent on road transport for survival. The efficiencies of road train operation keep improving by the year. This Mack is hauling 6 trailers from Cannington Mine to the railhead near Cloncurry. This gives an idea of the size these giants have reached. While mining is a major income export earner, outback Australia is still cattle country. And it's Bronco branding time in Western Queensland. The Australian Championships are being held in Longreach, next to the Stockman's Hall of Fame. And where there is cattle work, transport is never far away. Bronco branding is an all-Australian sport, showing off the skills of stock men and women, and a living piece of history showing how it was done in the past. A calf is caught by rope by the catcher, who rides the Bronco horse. The calf is then hauled up to the Bronco panel, and the skilled ground crew move into action. Leg ropes on, the calf is pulled to the ground and held. and branded with white paint. In real life, the calves would be branded with a red-hot firebrand. Bronco teams from 4 states vie for the championship. But what do visitors to the outback think?
Same as football, Bronco branding out here, football in the cities, you know, lifesaving on the coast. They're all part of the Australian culture.
Oh, I haven't seen anything like it before. I reckon it's great.
I've just come along to support my husband.
You might have a go at it yourself.
Something you can sit and watch all day.
Yeah, it is actually.
Yeah. Compared to camp drafting's boring after a while. Even if you're a drafter, it's boring. This is good.
In 2 days, the dust settles. The Cup goes to South Australia this year, and the festivities are over. Stock workers and truck drivers, station owners and transport operators all return to their everyday work. Where big teams of stock workers handled the work on large company places, more marginal outback properties are very much a family affair, like at the Northern Territory's Kurrundi Station. Peter and Brenda Saint are not your typical road train operators. They own a cattle station in a remote region of Central Australia. As transport was one of the major costs, they invested in a road train and have lifted the profitability of Kurrundi Station. The main market for these cattle is 2,000 kilometres away. And Peter Saint drives his cattle there with his big Mack Titan.
Currently run about 9,000 head of cattle here. We run about 5,000 breeders. Progressively trying to, predominantly we're all Hereford, pole Hereford. 30% of it would be done in interstation carting. But we've got nearly 600 k's of road network on the place. And all of our weaners, cows, whichever paddocks driest or whether we've got to shift them, it's all done with a truck. And the other 70%, roughly 70%, is predominantly done through to Adelaide. We bill ourselves for carting our own stock. We treat it as a totally separate business, as if we got Timor or RTA or another carrier in. You know, we treat it totally as a business. We charge ourselves, it comes out of our account sales. All the running expenses of the truck, trailers and so forth come out of a totally separate bank account, and always at the end of the 12 months in retrospective of getting another carrier in, we charge the same rate as what another carrier would charge. And in that bank account has always got more money in it than what it started off at the beginning of the season, so obviously it does pay.
The big Mack pulls 3 trailers, each a double-decker. So in one lift, the outfit shifts 6 decks of cattle. When it's time to work the cattle, the whole family chips in. It's hot in the cattle yards, stinking hot, and dusty. The parched land still waits for the first storms of the season, but work still needs to be done. The family draft the cattle, separating calves from their complaining mothers. The calves are then earmarked and branded. Male calves are castrated. Then the heifers need to be separated from the bulls, a job for the big Mack Titan. Just driving across Kurrundi Station is the distance from farm to market in more settled areas. The big truck follows tracks usually thought to be the domain of 4-wheel drivers. The young cows are jumped off at yards adjacent to their new home, far from the roving eyes of amorous bulls. And the big road train has an easy day. Tomorrow it'll be heading off on the 2,000 kilometres run to Jepp's Cross sale yards in Adelaide. While Peter Saint is heading for the sale yards, it's time to head for the East Coast capital of Brisbane. The Brisbane Truck Show is one of Australia's major transport events, and manufacturers say this is where most operators come to check out the latest in trucks and equipment. And just about all manufacturers have road train spec prime movers on show. There are many tales about bushies coming to Brisbane and pulling out a dog-eared old checkbook and paying cash for a brand new truck at this show. Big news on the Mack stand was the powering of the top-of-the-range Titan with the new Cummins signature engine, rated at 600 horsepower plus. This signals the end of production for the now legendary Mack V8 as a premium power plant for road train operations. according to Mack Trucks Australia's chief engineer, Mark Albertson.
I think what we're seeing now is an evolution of Mack from the E9 over to the Cummins engine. And that's really the result of the fact that the E9 over the years, the usage has dwindled as far as usage in America and Canada. And it's being mainly used in Australia and also in France. But because the numbers were low, we couldn't justify the yearly costs required to update the engine every year, for example, for emissions requirements and other technology requirements. And because of that, we had to go looking for another engine. And in the States, back at MTI, they decided, they researched the market and they found that they thought Cummins was the best company to partner with. So they signed a strategic agreement with Cummins. At that point, the pathway was kind of set for us to look to Cummins to supply the high horsepower engine for our Titan.
Don't forget, folks, Western Star Trucks, it's King's Choice in motor vehicles and trucks. It's all happening here at the Truck and Machinery Shop. We're the Memphis Movers, and we're going to put a bit of a light step, bit of shake, rattle and roll, and movement in your day. All right.
The gimmicks were plentiful on the Western Star stand. Also some serious heavy-duty machinery. The new Constellations were attracting plenty of attention, probably more than the corporate robotics.
Care to buy a shiny truck? We have lots on sale.
Mercedes-Benz, under its new flag Daimler Chrysler, made a big splash at the show, with traditional Mercedes-Benz models taking second run in the Glitz Stakes behind the company's Freightliner brand, now in its 10th year in Australia, and the newly acquired Ford heavy truck lineup, now called Sterling. Freightliner's senior manager of marketing, Alan McLaren, says the new Century class and the skyscraping Argosy models are the main features of the Freightliner stand.
This is the first public viewing of these models and certainly is creating a lot of interest for us, so we're really excited about that, obviously. Well, both of these trucks really, they had a number of design criteria, but one of the major ones in the United States, well, the two major ones I should suggest would be the cost of operation, lowering maintenance costs in particular, trying to extend service intervals as long as we safely could. The second one was to perhaps reach new levels of driver satisfaction from heavy vehicles.
Sterling Chief Executive Frank Lacera says his company is seeking to pick up the traditional Ford customers, plus new ones.
Sterling is essentially picking up the model range that Ford Heavy Trucks had as Louisville into this marketplace, and we're launching, well, essentially 3 base models. The white truck you see here is an AT9500, fully spec for B-double work. That truck is a 34 pallet B-double truck. We offer a Detroit Cummins power from 430 to 525 horsepower. The orange vehicle is an AT9500 spec for road train. This is a 90-tonne road train spec, again with 500 horsepower and quite a large sleeper.
And what about the colourful one behind us?
And the colourful truck behind us is essentially a typical line haul truck you would see in Australian roads, a 45-foot trailer, a 40-inch bunk, and that particular vehicle has a Detroit 470 horsepower in it.
And Frank, who decided on the colour scheme?
Actually, it was a combination of our dealers. I think I have to be guilty in terms of the striping. We have a graphic artist that does some work for us, and we intended to make a statement, and I think it's achieved that.
A wide range of Volvo trucks made a first appearance at the show. Brum van der Schaar is Volvo's general manager for sales, and he says globalisation is helping Volvo make inroads into truck operations that have previously preferred North American trucks.
All the vehicles we have on display here are vehicles that we're launching in Australia through 1999.
So just summing up, what trends do you see emerging from this truck show as far as Volvo's direction goes?
Being a predominant supplier in this market in Australia, and we're also we have the opportunity of drawing from a number of our operations on a global basis. And as I said earlier, we've put our toe in the water with the N14. I'm not going to confirm anything what we could be doing this year, but this is only the start of what could possibly happen in the future, and we think we're on the right track now and meeting the demands of our customers, because the customers are certainly putting more and more demands on the manufacturers in respect to supply and service agreements, financing arrangement, and what we're really aiming for is supplying a total package to the customer's needs.
From each Brisbane truck show, a truck of the show is selected. And from the bevy of glittering heavyweight beauties, It was the Mack Titan hybrid, born to a life of heavy, slogging road train work, that won the day.
We've won Truck of the Show here. We couldn't be any happier. It's been brilliant. We've put a lot of effort in, and it's really paid off.
Like to have what's basically a very utilitarian truck. Does that win Truck of the Show? Does that mean something to Mack trucks?
Well, certainly. The Titan's the pride of our fleet. It's the largest truck we have in the range and the road-going versions, and it really means something that this truck's taken out that role. Hampton Transport they're just about to take delivery of 3 of these vehicles, and they'll put this vehicle through the most arduous conditions in Australia, hauling stock through the top end of Northern Territory and Western Australia.
From the city traffic and hype of the truck show, it's a pleasure to be on the road, now heading in an unfamiliar direction, deep into the more southern state of New South Wales. This is the land of fast-moving single-trailer express transport, where yesterday is too late for deliveries. But in the southwest of the state, in the agricultural lands of the Riverina, heavy-duty lobbying by transport operators has brought about a hard-won win in allowing the operation of road trains on certain routes. Rice has become a favoured crop in the irrigated farmlands of the Riverina, and this golden grain has become the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for many farmers. John McNaught runs McNaught's Transport out of Finley, and he says rice has become an essential export for Australia.
Yes, there's something like over the whole industry about 1.3+ million tonnes grown, and I guess in the Murray Valley is where we are, is around about 400,000 tonnes.
And where does all this rice go?
Initially it's off the paddy fields into the rice growers' storage sheds. It's there segregated, aerated, and then moved back to mill.
It ends up on whose plates?
Well, around the world. Japan, Middle East, Australia, and anywhere where the marketers tend to sell it. Well, really, where we're basically involved with is the transport from the rice grower sheds into the mill. And during harvest, we run a 24-hour operation, and we then cart it from the sheds into outside storages to allow for the harvest to continue, and then out of season, then we cart from those outside storages back to the mill.
Can you just give us an overview of your fleet today?
Today we're running 7 road trains, of which 3 of those can be converted to B double, where we can't use the road trains, which gives us, as far as we're concerned, an excellent logistics operation to handle the crop. We use quite a few subcontractors during harvest, and at this stage it seems to be running quite well.
How long have you been running road trains here?
Down here we started trialling 3 years ago. There's a lot of work has gone into it in that period, especially in the initial periods, because the acceptance wasn't good, mainly because of the unknown. People weren't familiar with road trains, and they were concerned with the traffic mixes, and they just really didn't know anything about the manoeuvrability of road trains. And I guess that was our major problem, and once we had done a few trials and it showed how efficient they were and that they weren't the big bad ogres that people had thought, it has worked well. Our main exercise initially was to run in this Finley, Jerilderie and Berrigan area back to Deniliquin, and we did trials from Deniliquin to Finley and then around to the rice sheds and up and down the main streets, and that was in conjunction with police and RTA. And then once they proved that, or could see that it worked, it hasn't been much of a problem since.
Mark Fisher drives the Freightliner, and he seems pretty happy with the outfit to date.
Oh, it's a Cummins, 525 Cummins with a 18-speed gearbox.
What's it like to drive?
Lovely truck to drive, very comfortable, seating arrangements and steering. Yeah, the gear change, very comfortable to drive.
And what did you get out of to drive this?
I got out of a T600 to drive this. The visibility in this is tremendous compared to the T600.
But you know, Kenworth, bit of a step down.
No, yeah, you might say that, but no, I wouldn't take it as a step down, no. I'm very happy with the way the Freightliner is going at the moment.
John McNaught says he had some trouble asking for chrome fittings on his road train, something rare in outback road train operations. But he finally got that southern look. I asked him about speed limits.
A road train is limited to 90 kilometres an hour, and then we have restrictions of 50 kilometres an hour in the build-up and town areas.
To do a comparison, previously, before road trains came in down here, What was the sort of payload you'd carry with one trailer?
Well, we would carry approximately 27 tonnes with a single trailer, and now we're carrying between 50 and 53 tonnes.
And what's this meant to you as an operator?
Oh, it's been absolutely magnificent for us. It's halved the movements, it's increased our productivity, it's twice as easy to coordinate, and from a logistics point of view, well, there's no comparison.
Now, today we've been looking at a Freightliner in your operation. What's the background of this truck?
Well, that truck we purchased in October of '98 at the annual dinner of the Australian Road Train Association. That was a fundraising auction to help the Australian Road Train Association. It's
a bit lonely at this stage in a fleet of Kenworths and Western Stars. How's it shaping up so far?
Yeah, pretty good at this stage. It's a very comfortable truck to drive, and we're very keen to try it. It's got the same running gear as all the rest of our other fleets, and we're currently running Cummins, so it's fitting in well at this point.
From the Riverina, it's only a hop, step and a jump into South Australia, and a search through the Flinders for a Western Star Constellation run by Argyle Transport. Argyle driver Darryl Fox is loading sheep into his B-double at Jamestown. He has two particularly efficient assistants. This Western Star belongs to the small fleet of Peter and Heather Burden.
There's a 550 Cat in it, and it's got an 18-speed box with the Hendrickson airbag suspension. We're very happy with the specs at this stage, but you know, you don't know straight away whether a product's going to be good. It's always 3 or 4 years down the track. Our sheep operation at this stage would be about 70%, I'd say. Where probably a few years ago it was 50-50.
And what sort of configurations for the trailers do you use?
We've got 2 B-doubles and 1 single 4-decker. They're all convertibles from sheep to cattle. So yeah, we basically need it that way to operate in the area.
Traditionally, you've had Macks here. You bought a Western Star last year. What prompted you to do that?
We just wanted to have a bit of a change without being too serious about it, and we're very happy with the support that Western Star was certainly giving to our Livestock Transporters Association, and we'd been involved with that for a long time now, 10, 12 years.
Peter's partner in Argyle Transport, Heather Burden, is playing a very active role in the promotion of Truck Care, a quality assurance scheme for livestock carriers designed to meet the needs of markets, clients and the public image of livestock transport. It was worth the trip down to Argyle Transport's headquarters at Millicent to say g'day.
The Australian Livestock Transporters Association decided that with introducing some sort of a quality system to our members, that hopefully we could address issues including animal welfare specifically, and our program is customer focused, so we're trying to make sure that we look after our customers.
Is it being driven by animal welfare, or is it a much more holistic approach to the whole industry, and as you say, with a focus on customer needs?
Yes, I think animal welfare definitely is a very important part of truck care. We're trying to do the right thing by not only animals but the customers as well, and but that's only one part of truck care. I mean, we address quite a few other standards within the program, and but like I say, it's customer focused, and we're certainly trying to assist our members to better manage their businesses.
Olympic Dam is a mega mining operation at Roxby Downs in the outback region of South Australia. Copper and uranium are processed on site by the Western Mining Corporation. The transport requirements of this mine are gargantuan, and for some years, Western Mining employed a wide range of subcontractors. But the mining company's bean counters had a hard time identifying the day-to-day cost of transport services to and from the mine. So enter Linfox, one of Australia's major hub distribution transport operators. Linfox negotiated to supply all transport logistics to and from Olympic Dam to Western Mining. And Linfox Regional Manager for South Australia and the Northern Territory, Mike Morich, says the two companies struck an agreement.
We won a 5-year contract with a 3-year option just over 18 months ago. And the scope of it is that we are to provide all the logistics services for Western Mining, and that includes every product that they have going to the site plus all products out. It equates to effectively about in excess of 800,000 tonne a year northbound, which comes from various points around Australia, and just over 200,000 tonnes southbound. The main southbound product being copper, which is just in excess of 200,000 tonne.
The Linfox operation is headquartered at Port Adelaide, close to shipping facilities. Here, Linfox manages stockpiles for all materials required by the mine, as well as organising the transport needs from twice-daily express freighters to the loading and unloading of trailers that will make up the road train network to the mine. After hooking up as triples at Port Augusta, a typical day sees a road train making its daily trip to the mine. Linfox is using Cummins-powered Freightliners exclusively for the road train operation. 28 prime movers were bought in one hit, and Linfox outsources all maintenance and upkeep, maintaining a focus on the company's core business, organising the freight operation. This Freightliner is on its usual run today, pulling a triple road train of diesel fuel to help meet the huge energy needs of the mine. The road to Roxby Downs has been upgraded, and the rig pulls into the mine around midday. Two trailers are unloaded at the mine head, and the truck has to go into the mine proper to unload the last trailer.
The operation that we have is different to anything else that's operating in Australia at the moment, and everything is productivity based. So one of the problems that we had was changing, I guess, a bit of the psyche of Western Mining, the people up on site, to be used to the fact that productivity was our key issue to maintain the rates that Western Mining wanted, and that was probably the biggest heartache. Plus we came in at the time when Western Mining was going through a huge expansion. They've just gone through a $1.8 billion expansion, and as a result there were a lot of construction people on site for the first 18 months of the contract, and that's just completed now, which now we're starting to settle into a nice pattern.
Full security and safety checks are maintained at this uranium mine. And before leaving, all vehicles go through an underbody spray to remove dust. The Linfox driver does his final paperwork. And heads his Freightliner back towards the road train hookup point at Port Augusta for a driver change. And the truck does it all over again. It's good to be travelling north again, heading into a clear night sky, leaving the weary, dreary winter weather of southern Australia behind. It's morning, and we're driving through the opal mining town of Coober Pedy. Many houses are built underground here to escape the fierce summer heat. But the search is not for the fire of the opal on this trip, but in the expanse of a 1,500 kilometre stretch of bitumen highway, an attempt to rendezvous with a truck. In fact, the goal is to meet 2 trucks, one southbound and one northbound. And eureka! We catch up with the southbound truck first, a Volvo prime mover hammering southward with empty fuel trailers. This Volvo is from the fleet of Northern Territory-based Australian Fuel Distributors. Australian Fuel Distributors supplies fuel to depots and service stations right across Northern Australia. Much of the fuel is hauled into the Northern Territory from the South Australian capital of Adelaide. And to do this, AFD's 4-trailer outfits are pulled by Cummins-powered Volvo prime movers. AFD pioneered the use of 4-trailer combinations in the Northern Territory, and amongst other brands have had Volvos on the operation from the outset. Starting out with a Globetrotter powered with Volvo's own 520 horsepower engine, General Manager of AFD, Brooke David, reckons there were problems with the Volvo engine, but the company persisted. When Volvo started talking about putting the N14 Cummins into the new NH series, AFD took a couple on board, and to date are pretty happy. AFD driver Roger is heading south. He's delivered his load to Alice Springs and is on his way home so the truck can be reloaded and turned around. 2 Volvos are on the Adelaide to Alice Springs fuel shuttle, and Roger uses his satellite phone to call a northbound truck, and they decide to meet at a roadhouse. Out here, roadhouses can be a couple of 100 kilometres apart. Roger pulls into Cadney Homestead Roadhouse. While Roger hopes to meet with northbound colleague Ben, time is tight on this run, so he orders lunch. The second truck doesn't arrive, so Roger pulls out, heading for home. Only minutes later, the other AFD Volvo pulls into Cadney. Driver Ben grabs a quick cup of coffee, and the Cummins 525 is again hauling the fully loaded 130,000 litre, 160-tonne vehicle north. The Volvo is travelling with a new Iveco, the new name for Australia's international brand trucks. It's a great open country here in the northern regions of South Australia, and even this big road train is dwarfed by the sheer scale of the landscape. As Ben travels north, the flatness of South Australia lifts with the folded blue ranges of Central Australia as the Volvo approaches the border. One and a half thousand kilometres north of where it loaded, Ben pulls into the AFD depot in Alice Springs. The fuel is unloaded, the truck checked, and it's time to do it all again. Another company to embrace the new Volvos is Alice Springs-based GKT Transport. George Fitzgerald owns and runs GKT Transport, and like many other operators, he bases his operation in Alice Springs, and his trucks run mainly to Darwin. But one express contract means George pulls triples all the way from Adelaide to Darwin, right across the continent.
We're doing triples out of South Australia as well. That's all the triples we do out of South Australia are related to Woolworths. And the reason we do that is the time factor on the train. Running totally legal, we beat the train by 24 hours in Alice Springs. So that's why Woolies want it.
George subcontracts to a major freight forwarder, Top, and runs 12 trucks, a mix of Macks, Kenworths, Volvos and a Freightliner. GKT was one of the first fleets to venture into European manufactured trucks such as the new NH Volvos now running in the fleet. Most Northern Territory operators prefer North American sourced equipment, and there is a rumour going around that George bought the Volvos after a good meal and a lot of red wine supplied by the Volvo people. But that's only a rumour. Anyhow, George reckons the 525 horsepower Cummins-powered Volvos driving through a Road Ranger transmission are doing the job well for him. The Volvo pulling express trailers has left Alice Springs with a Kenworth travelling companion. Destination, Darwin. The big trucks labour through the hills north of Alice, slowed down by roadworks. Then it's clear running, northwards through the dramatic landscape of Central Australia. Time for a tyre check, and the drivers are impressed with the way the Volvos are handling the job.
They love them. They love them. The only complaint I get is they're too quiet and too smooth.
That's a complaint?
Well, they use it as one. They reckon it's not like driving a truck, so what do you say about that?
Sitting on 100 kilometres per hour, the two trucks continue their way northward over riverbeds that are dry for 9 months of the year in the Northern Territory. Past the smoothly rounded rock formations of the Devil's Marbles, and onward, with great chunks of distance being left behind, and still a mountain of miles ahead. At any one time, George Fitzgerald has his dozen road trains scattered across the breadth of Australia, and he wouldn't swap it for anything.
The road transport's been good to you up here?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't say anything different.
On this trip, the express refrigerated road trains continue through the sunset and into the night. In the morning, they'll be filling the supermarkets of Darwin. As George's trucks head north, we've a little detour to make onto the Buchanan Highway. With about 10,000 kilometres covered on this trip now, it's good to find a place to camp and roll out the swag in this lonely region. The Buchanan jabs out through the western half of the Northern Territory, a lonely bush track. It roughly follows what was known as the Murrumbidgee track, one of the roughest, toughest stock routes of Australia that has seen more disasters in lost cattle and men than just about any other stock route on the continent. And the disasters aren't finished out in this scrubby wilderness. As at daylight, we stumble on a lonely camp. There's been a breakdown, and we recognise the gear of an old mate and find a pretty forlorn group. It looks as though there might have been a little drowning of sorrows last night, and Lindsay takes a bit of stirring. Phil gets the breakfast fire roaring. The story unfolds. Apparently, the heavy haulage float that was being pulled by the old Mack has thrown a suspension and is now disabled. Phil cooks the breakfast steak in the traditional bush manner.
Coals, sharp, clean your teeth. Righto.
While the driver gets his early morning call, made effective with the threat of a cattle prod. It's decided that the trailer can be made mobile, but it won't be able to carry its load. Lindsay's earth-moving scraper. And Lindsay needs to be a couple of 100 kilometres west to start an earth-moving contract. So the scraper is refuelled and Phil starts the long track west while we go back to the trailer to attempt to right the wrongs. A couple of hours work and temporary repairs gets the gear back on the road, and the Mack retreats to its headquarters for more permanent repairs. The scraper, not your average bit of road transport, maintains its westerly course via an essential stop to ward off dehydration at Top Springs, of course. And yes, Lindsay got to his job and finished it. But we have to continue to Darwin. Darwin is the modern capital of the Northern Territory. Devastated only 25 years ago by Cyclone Tracy, it has been rebuilt to be Australia's only tropical capital city, and one not serviced by rail. So here, road train is king. And thinking of Cyclone Tracy makes you think of Tom Ostojic. He's a tipper operator who works the top end. During Cyclone Tracy, he and his young family rode out the rage in the cabin of his Flintstone Mack. The Ostojics have stuck with Mack trucks since then, and today run a fleet of 12 Macks, pulling double, triple and 4 trailer road trains. Tom Ostojic always resisted the energy to go to big V8 power, and in the 80s he ran what was considered by many to be an underpowered fleet for road train work. But his strategy proved correct, and the business has continued in steady growth over a quarter of a century. But with the entry of his sons into the business some 4 years ago, things changed, and some big power units were bought. Today, the flagship of the fleet is without doubt the 610 horsepower Mack Titan. Tom Ostojic's sons, Simon and Stephen, have now taken over the day-to-day operation of the fleet.
Mostly it's tipper work, pretty much always been around the tipper work. We go a little bit into float and freight work, but we generally try to stick with the tippers.
This truck we're looking at today, the Titan, why the step into big power?
Yeah, well, for years he's stuck with just the little 350s and that, and we've gone on doubles and even triples with him for years. It's only been the last probably 4 years. We've actually twisted his arm enough to give us a bit more power. Now we went started with the CHs with 400s and yeah, moved up to this now, mainly due to productivity.
With the higher cost, the higher capital cost of this, you think you're still ahead?
Yeah, well today you've got to go this way because you're up against big companies, and Darwin's not as small as it used to be, and you've got large companies up here now who can afford and do run gear up to this size and even bigger, and to compete with them you've got to go the same way.
Still a small company and you've survived. What do you think the reasons are?
Oh, definitely good management. Like the old man said, he's seen a lot of people come and go, and we've seen a lot of people come and go, myself and my brothers, so he definitely must be doing something right.
This is second generation Ostojic. What do you think you've brought to the company? Do you think you've brought a freshness or a new look at things?
I've definitely made a difference because since we've been involved, because most of us started finishing school around 95, about 4 years ago, he's sort of given us responsibilities and so forth, and he's managed to expand a lot greater. Like we've got twice as many trucks in the last 4 years. He's always had about 6 or 7 for the last probably 15 years. So yeah, it definitely helps him and a lot less pressure on himself.
And what's the story with the trailers?
Yeah, they're TriStar built trailers. Yeah, they're cable doored, which is, when we started out, probably the best and the most basic. The old man sort of steered away from hydraulic doors because there's more complications than that, and we've had no dramas with cable. Very easy to operate. You just whack the PDO in and they go up, and you have a look on the back, you can see the cable operation there, and it lowers the door in time for the load to remove itself.
So Darwin's been good to the Ostojic family?
Yeah, well, you can't complain. He had a good run, and the old man's got a pretty good reputation in Darwin, so there's no worries in finding work.
It's the break of day in the North West Queensland town of Cloncurry. Driver John Carr checks the big Western Star constellation in the yard of North West Fuels. Today, John will haul 115,000 litres, or about 30,000 gallons of fuel, from Cloncurry to Phosphate Hill Mine, a shorter haul leg of about 180 kilometres, but much of it over rugged, unsealed roads. The Constellation is powered by a 600 horsepower Cat engine, and pulls today's 140-tonne load slowly through the outskirts of Cloncurry before the sun has risen. The first section of the run is on a good quality sealed road, and John Carr settles the big beast to the work in hand. The distribution area covered by North West Fuels is about the size of the state of Texas.
We operate a fleet of 6 road trains throughout that area, covering a supply area of approximately full length of Queensland Northern Territory border down to halfway between Baduri-Birdsville.
Martin Jones is the manager of North West Fuels. He's been hauling fuel over the rough tracks of North West Queensland for nearly 2 decades.
It's a vast area, although a lot of it's very sparsely populated. In that area, the majority of the business is major pastoral companies, with the last 5 years a great influx of mining companies. And with that in mind, that's why we've gone for the bigger road train units.
John Carr is making good time on the narrow sealed road. This remote country is some of the most sparsely populated on Earth. The big Western Star crosses many dry creeks. In a few months' time, these will be roaring in flood in the wet season. At the end of the sealed road, John Carr pulls his big truck over. It's time to check the tyres. The introduction of the legal use of these 4 trailer units has only happened in recent times.
The idea of putting the AAB double combination, 4 trailer combination, into the fleet was simply to carry more fuel with the current weight restrictions that we have. Simply with its introduction and using triaxial dollies, we were able to increase our gross combined mass from 115 tonnes to 142.5 tonnes. That's given us a payload increase of approximately 19,000 litres per load, which in turn saves us about 36 hours work for one vehicle per week.
John Carr has finished his tyre check and pulls out onto the unsealed dirt road. Heavy traffic and weather conditions can change the road from week to week. Washouts and bulldust appear out of nowhere. The driver must maintain continual alertness under these conditions. And in this country of huge cattle stations, the roads are not fenced. Kangaroos can be a problem in the outback, but today it's cattle who have decided to make the road their home. And John has to hit the anchors so he doesn't make an unscheduled meat pie. Which brings the idea of a bit of a smoker or morning tea. Here out on the dirt roads of the outback, hundreds of kilometres from the nearest truck stop, life is still laid back enough to stop for a short break. And John and partner Janet enjoy the produce of North Queensland. And it's time to keep moving. On to Phosphate Hill Mine to unload and still ahead of schedule.
thanks for travelling with us on Road Train 99. I hope you enjoyed the trip. We'll see you down the track.